Imagine a 12-year-old boy, Gabriel, standing silent in a courtroom, accused of a crime too horrifying to comprehend, the murder of his newborn sister. But as the gavel falls and the judge declares the sentence, a quiet revelation begins to unravel a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. What secrets is Gabriel hiding? And why does his silence hold the key to justice? Stay tuned to uncover a heart-wrenching journey of pain, courage, and redemption. The courtroom was cold and silent, the kind of silence that amplified every rustle of paper and shuffle of feet. The wooden pews creaked as a small crowd of journalists, observers, and family members shifted uncomfortably. All eyes were fixed on the double doors, waiting for the accused to be brought in. The doors opened with a sharp creak, and Gabriel Martinez, a frail 12-year-old boy, entered the room. His wrists were bound with handcuffs that seemed far too large for his thin arms, and his head hung low as if the weight of the world was resting on his shoulders. Gabriel's worn sneakers, scuffed and too small, slapped against the marble floor as he shuffled forward between two uniformed officers. Behind him, his mother, Laura, gasped audibly, clutching a photograph of her infant daughter, Maria Elena, close to her chest. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, the grief etched into her face almost unbearable to witness. Victor, her husband, sat beside her, his jaw tight as he fought to hold back his own emotions. He reached out and gripped Laura's hand, both of them clinging to each other in their shared sorrow. "Court is now in session," announced the bailiff, his voice breaking the oppressive silence. The audience rose to their feet as Judge Ricardo Salinas entered, his presence commanding respect. Known for his unyielding pursuit of justice, Judge Salinas was a man who had seen it all. Yet, as he glanced at Gabriel, the youngest defendant he'd ever presided over, even he seemed momentarily conflicted. "You may be seated," the judge said, adjusting his glasses and looking down at the stack of documents before him. He cleared his throat and began, "This is the sentencing hearing for the case of the state versus Gabriel Martinez." Laura let out a quiet sob, and Victor tightened his grip on her hand. Sitting just a few rows behind them, Gabriel's defense attorney, Alejandro Torres, whispered urgently to his client, "Gabriel, remember what we talked about. If you want the judge to understand, you need to speak. Even a few words can make a difference." Gabriel didn't respond. His dark eyes remained fixed on the ground, his small frame hunched as if trying to make himself invisible. The prosecutor, Clara Reyes, rose to her feet and began to summarize the case. Her tone was measured but firm. "Your Honor, on the night of September 15th, Maria Elena Martinez, an infant of only 3 weeks old, was found deceased in her crib. Evidence points to death by suffocation. The defendant's fingerprints were found on a pillow used to commit the act, and a witness has placed the defendant near the victim's room during the time of death." Laura's body shook as she fought back another sob, and Victor whispered soothing words to her, though his own face betrayed his anguish. The prosecutor continued, "While we understand the defendant's age, the severity of the crime and the evidence presented leave no room for doubt. We must ensure justice for Maria Elena." Attorney Torres stood next, his voice calm but impassioned. "Your Honor, we must not forget that we are dealing with a child, a boy of only 12 years old. Gabriel Martinez has no history of violence, no behavioral issues at school. He was an exemplary student, described by his teachers as kind and gentle." Torres paused, glancing at Gabriel. "What we see here is not a hardened criminal but a frightened boy. A boy who has remained silent throughout this entire trial. A boy who, for reasons we do not yet understand, is unable to express himself." Judge Salinas nodded thoughtfully but remained silent. He looked down at Gabriel. "Gabriel Martinez," he said, his voice steady, "you have the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say before I deliver your sentence?" The room fell deathly silent. All eyes turned to Gabriel, who remained motionless for a moment. Slowly he raised his head, his tear-filled eyes meeting the judge's. His lips quivered, as if he were trying to form words, but no sound came. Instead, he shook his head and lowered his gaze once more. Judge Salinas sighed deeply and leaned back in his chair. "Very well," he said. This court has carefully reviewed the evidence and testimony presented during the trial. While the defendant's age has been taken into consideration, the nature of the crime and the loss of an innocent life cannot be ignored. Laura's grip on Victor's hand tightened until her knuckles turned white. The tension in the room was palpable as the judge prepared to deliver his verdict. "Gabriel Martinez," Judge Salinas said solemnly, "this court finds you guilty of first-degree homicide. Considering your age, the sentence will be 9 years in a juvenile detention center, effective immediately." The sound of the gavel striking echoed like thunder in the courtroom. Laura let out a wail of despair, collapsing into Victor's arms. Victor buried his face in his wife's shoulder, his body shaking with suppressed sobs. From the back row, Gabriel's teacher, Rosa Valdez, who had come to support him, whispered, "No, he's just a child." Gabriel himself remained eerily calm, as if he had expected this outcome all along. His small hands trembled slightly in the handcuffs, but his face betrayed no emotion. As the officers approached to escort Gabriel away, Judge Salinas spoke again, his tone softer. "Mrs. Martinez, you will have time to say goodbye to your son before his transfer." Laura tried to rush toward her son, but Victor held her back. "Let me go, Victor," she cried. "He's my baby. I need to hold him." The officers led Gabriel out of the courtroom, his small figure disappearing behind the heavy doors. The sound of Laura's sobs filled the room, mingling with the murmurs of the shocked audience. In the front row, Dr. Isabel Rojas, the forensic psychologist who had evaluated Gabriel, sat silently, her mind racing. Something didn't add up. The boy's silence, his reactions during the trial, the details of the case, they all pointed to a deeper story. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed a grave injustice. As the courtroom emptied, Isabel resolved to dig deeper. Somewhere in Gabriel's silence lay the key to the truth, and she was determined to find it. The juvenile detention facility loomed ahead, its gray walls stark against the pale morning sky. Gabriel Martinez sat silently in the back seat of the transport van, his small frame dwarfed by the 2 officers sitting in the front. His hands rested in his lap, his wrists red from the friction of the handcuffs he had worn all morning. Outside the van, the world moved on, but for Gabriel, time felt as though it had stopped. In the courtroom earlier, he hadn't uttered a word. His attorney, Alejandro Torres, had urged him to speak, to tell the judge anything that might explain his actions, but Gabriel had remained silent, his lips pressed tightly together. His silence had sealed his fate, leaving him to shoulder the unbearable weight of his sister's death alone. At home, Laura Martinez sat in the corner of the living room, clutching Maria Elena's baby blanket. The soft fabric, once a source of comfort during late-night feedings, now served as a cruel reminder of what had been taken from her. Tears streamed down her face as Victor tried to console her, but his words felt hollow. "How could this happen, Victor?" Laura whispered, her voice trembling. "Gabriel loved Maria Elena. He sang to her, decorated her room with his drawings. How could he do this?" Victor sighed deeply, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't know, Laura. I don't know what to believe anymore." In the corner of the room, Mateo, Laura's brother, stood quietly, watching the scene unfold. "You need to be strong," he said, stepping forward. "Gabriel needs you to be strong for him. He's just a child." Laura glanced at Mateo, her expression conflicted. "A child who is accused of killing his sister, Mateo. How do I reconcile that?" Mateo knelt beside his sister, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to reconcile anything yet. What you need to do is focus on getting through this day by day." At the detention facility, Gabriel was escorted to a small, sterile room. A social worker, Sandra Gutierrez, sat waiting for him, her kind eyes searching his face for any sign of emotion. "Hello, Gabriel," she said softly. "My name is Sandra. I'll be working with you during your time here." Gabriel didn't respond. He kept his gaze fixed on the floor, his shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into himself. Sandra leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. "I know this is scary, Gabriel, but you're not alone here. If you ever feel ready to talk, I'll be here to listen." Still, Gabriel remained silent. The only movement was the slight trembling of his hands, which he quickly hid beneath the table. Back at the Martinez home, Laura and Victor sat across from their attorney, Alejandro Torres, in their dimly lit kitchen. Torres spread out a stack of papers on the table, his expression grim. "We need to talk about an appeal," Torres said. "There are inconsistencies in the case, but without Gabriel's testimony, it's difficult to build a strong argument." Victor leaned forward, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why won't he talk, Alejandro? He's our son. He should be able to tell us what happened." Torres sighed. "I believe Gabriel is scared, but I don't know why. His silence isn't typical. It's almost as if he's protecting someone or something." Laura stiffened, her gaze darting to Mateo, who sat silently at the edge of the room. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. Gabriel wouldn't lie. He's a good boy. The following day, Dr. Isabel Rojas visited Gabriel at the detention facility. The forensic psychologist had been troubled by Gabriel's silence and requested a session to try and understand what was holding him back. In the small room, Isabel sat across from Gabriel, her notepad resting on her lap. "Hi, Gabriel," she said warmly. "I'm Dr. Rojas. I'm here to help you." Gabriel glanced at her briefly before looking away. "I know you're scared," Isabel continued, "but sometimes keeping everything inside can feel even scarier. If there's something you want to tell me, I promise it will stay between us for now." Gabriel remained silent, but Isabel noticed the way his hands clenched tightly into fists. There was tension in his small frame, a sign of something unspoken weighing heavily on him. "Can you draw something for me?" Isabel asked, sliding a piece of paper and crayons across the table. "You don't have to talk if you're not ready. Just draw whatever you're thinking about." Gabriel hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the paper. Slowly, he picked up a black crayon and began to draw. Isabel watched as the image took shape. A crib, a dark figure looming over it, and a smaller figure standing in the corner, watching. When he was done, Gabriel pushed the paper across the table without looking at her. Isabel studied the drawing carefully, her heart sinking. She leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. "Gabriel, who is this?" Gabriel's breathing quickened and he shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. It was the first word he had spoken since his sentencing. Isabel nodded, recognizing the fragile state he was in. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to say anything right now. But I want you to know that I believe you." That evening, Laura found herself in Maria Elena's nursery. The room had remained untouched since the night of her death. Drawings that Gabriel had made decorated the walls, bright, cheerful pictures of flowers, animals, and sunshine. They seemed so at odds with the darkness that had engulfed their family. Mateo entered the room quietly, his footsteps soft on the carpet. "Laura," he said, his voice low, "you shouldn't be in here. It's not good for you." Laura turned to her brother, her eyes glistening with tears. "Why, Mateo? Why does this feel so wrong? Gabriel couldn't have done this. I know my son." Mateo placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm. "Sometimes we don't really know what people are capable of, even those closest to us." His words sent a chill down Laura's spine, but before she could respond, he stepped out of the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. In the detention facility, Gabriel lay on the thin mattress of his cot, staring at the ceiling. The image of his uncle's face loomed in his mind, a shadow that refused to leave. He clutched a small piece of paper in his hand, one he had torn from his notebook during the session with Isabel. On it, he had written 3 words over and over. "I tried, I tried, I tried." As the lights dimmed and the facility grew quiet, Gabriel's silence remained unbroken, but within him, the truth was beginning to stir, desperate to be heard. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of day that seemed to mirror the weight on Laura and Victor's hearts. They sat across from Dr. Isabel Rojas in a small, windowless room at the Juvenile Detention Center. Isabel had requested this meeting after her session with Gabriel, and the urgency in her voice had left no room for hesitation. "I wanted to share my concerns," Isabel began, her voice calm but serious. She placed Gabriel's drawing on the table between them. "This was the first thing Gabriel created when I asked him to express his feelings. Look closely." Laura leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. The crude crayon lines depicted a crib with a tall, shadowy figure standing over it. In the corner, a smaller figure stood, its form trembling. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for the drawing, her fingers trembling. "That's Maria Elena's crib," Laura whispered, her voice breaking. "And that smaller figure, it's Gabriel, isn't it?" Victor frowned deeply, his gaze fixed on the drawing. "What are you saying, Doctor, that Gabriel wasn't the one who—" "I'm not saying that definitively," Isabel clarified. "But I believe this drawing might represent Gabriel's experience that night. He could have been a witness rather than the perpetrator." Victor leaned back, his arms crossed. "If that's true, then why hasn't he said anything? Why hasn't he told us what happened?" Isabel hesitated before responding, carefully choosing her words. Children in traumatic situations often stay silent out of fear. Fear of not being believed, fear of consequences, or even fear of further harm. Gabriel's behavior suggests he's protecting someone, and I need to understand who or what that is. Later that afternoon, Laura and Victor returned home with the weight of Isabel's words hanging heavily over them. As they entered the house, they found Mateo in the living room, sitting on the couch with his hands clasped tightly together. His head snapped up when he saw them. "You're back," Mateo said, his voice unusually tense. "How did it go?" Laura glanced at Victor before responding. "Dr. Rojas thinks Gabriel might have been a witness, not the one who hurt Maria Elena." Mateo's expression froze for a fraction of a second before he forced a smile. "Well, that's unexpected. But that doesn't explain the evidence against him, does it?" Victor frowned, his gaze narrowing. "Evidence can be misinterpreted, Mateo. Maybe we were too quick to believe the worst." Mateo stood abruptly, brushing his hands on his pants. "I need some air," he muttered, moving toward the door. "Let me know if you need anything." As the door closed behind him, Laura turned to Victor, her voice low. "Did you see that? The way he reacted?" Victor nodded, his jaw tightening. He seemed uneasy. Meanwhile, Isabel returned to her office, her mind racing. She retrieved the folder containing Gabriel's case file, reviewing the details with a new perspective. Witness testimony, forensic evidence, psychological evaluations, everything pointed to Gabriel's guilt, but something didn't add up. Her thoughts were interrupted by Sandra Gutierrez, the social worker assigned to Gabriel's case. "Doctor," Sandra said, stepping into the room with a hesitant expression, "I thought you might want to see this." Sandra handed Isabel a series of attendance records from Gabriel's school. Isabel scanned the papers quickly, her eyes narrowing. "Frequent absences," she muttered. "Always on the days following nights when Mateo stayed with the family." Sandra nodded. "And there's more. I spoke to Gabriel's teacher who mentioned an incident a few months ago. Gabriel came to school with bruises on his arms. When asked about them, he said he fell, but she wasn't convinced." Isabel's mind raced. "Sandra, I need you to pull every record you can find related to Mateo. Anything. Criminal history, financial issues, prior residences. We're running out of time before Gabriel's next hearing." That evening, Laura sat alone in Maria Elena's nursery, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. She picked up one of Gabriel's drawings from the wall, tracing her finger over the cheerful sun and flowers. Her heart ached with the memory of her son proudly taping the picture above the crib, his face glowing with excitement. As she stood there, Mateo appeared in the doorway, his presence startling her. "Laura," he said softly, "you shouldn't be in here. It's not good for you." Laura turned to face him, her expression guarded. "I was just thinking about how much Gabriel loved her. He was so excited to be a big brother." Mateo took a step closer, his hands in his pockets. "Kids can be unpredictable, Laura. Sometimes their emotions get the better of them. Her stomach churned at his words. What are you trying to say? Mateo shrugged. Just that maybe Gabriel got overwhelmed. Maybe he didn't mean to hurt her. Laura stared at him, her heart pounding. Why would you say that? Mateo held her gaze for a moment before breaking eye contact. I'm just trying to make sense of it. Like you. The next morning, Isabel received a call from Sandra. Doctor, I found something, Sandra said, her voice urgent. Mateo has a sealed record. It's not much, but it includes a restraining order filed by a previous employer's family. The details are vague, but it involves inappropriate behavior toward their child. Isabel's breath caught. This could be the breakthrough we need. Forward everything to the prosecutor's office and get Judge Salinas on the phone. We need an emergency hearing. At the detention center, Isabel sat across from Gabriel for another session. She placed the drawing he had made in front of him. Gabriel, she said gently, you're so brave for making this. I know it wasn't easy. Gabriel stared at the drawing, his small hands trembling. Can you tell me who this is? Isabel asked, pointing to the shadowy figure. Gabriel's lip quivered, but he remained silent. It's okay, Isabel reassured him. You're safe here. No one can hurt you. Finally, Gabriel whispered, his voice barely audible. Uncle Mateo. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Isabel leaned forward, her voice steady. Did he hurt Maria Elena? Gabriel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I tried to stop him, but he told me he'd hurt Mom if I said anything. Isabel's heart broke for the boy sitting across from her. You did everything you could, Gabriel, and now you've been so brave to tell the truth. She stood and left the room, her steps resolute. The truth was finally emerging, and she wouldn't stop until Gabriel's name was cleared and justice was served. The courtroom was buzzing with hushed conversations as Gabriel's family took their seats for the emergency review hearing. Laura clutched Victor's hand, her knuckles white. Next to them sat Dr. Isabel Rojas, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp with determination. Across the aisle, Mateo entered, his face unreadable as he glanced at Gabriel, who was seated next to his defense attorney, Alejandro Torres. Judge Ricardo Salinas entered, and the room fell silent. He took his seat, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the files in front of him. This is an emergency review hearing in the case of Gabriel Martinez. The defense has presented new evidence that merits our immediate attention. Isabel felt a flicker of hope as the judge turned his attention to Alejandro. Mr. Torres, you may proceed. Alejandro stood, his voice steady. Your Honor, we have new information that suggests my client, Gabriel Martinez, may not be the perpetrator of the crime, but rather a witness to it. I request that Dr. Isabel Rojas, a forensic psychologist, be allowed to present her findings. Judge Salinas nodded. Proceed, Dr. Rojas. Isabel walked to the stand, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. After taking the oath, she began, Your Honor, over the course of my sessions with Gabriel, I have observed behaviors consistent with severe trauma and fear. He has shown signs of what we call selective traumatic silence, a coping mechanism where a child avoids speaking about an event due to fear of retaliation or harm to themselves or others. She held up Gabriel's drawing and placed it on the projector. The image of a shadowy figure looming over a crib appeared on the screen, causing a ripple of murmurs in the courtroom. This drawing, Isabel continued, was created by Gabriel during one of our sessions. It depicts a dark figure near the victim's crib and a smaller figure watching from the shadows. Gabriel later identified the smaller figure as himself and the dark figure as his uncle Mateo. Gasps filled the room. Mateo, sitting at the back, stiffened, his jaw tightening. Judge Salinas banged his gavel for order. Dr. Rojas, the judge said, are you suggesting that Mateo Martinez is the true perpetrator? Isabel nodded. Based on my observations and Gabriel's testimony during our private sessions, yes. Gabriel stated that he witnessed his uncle harming Maria Elena and was threatened into silence. The prosecutor, Esteban Morales, stood. Your Honor, I request a recess to verify this new information. We need to investigate these allegations thoroughly. Before the judge could respond, Alejandro interjected, "Your Honor, we also have evidence from the Department of Social Services indicating a previous restraining order filed against Mr. Mateo Martinez for inappropriate behavior toward a child." Mateo shot to his feet, his face red with anger. "This is absurd. You're taking the word of a child over mine?" Judge Salinas glared at him. "Mr. Martinez, you will remain seated or be removed from this courtroom." Laura's heart pounded as she looked at Mateo, recalling moments that now seemed suspicious. His eagerness to care for Maria Elena, the way Gabriel always seemed tense around him, the bruises Gabriel had once explained away as accidents. It was as if puzzle pieces were falling into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. After a brief recess, Detective Mariana Gutierrez entered the courtroom with new evidence. She walked to the stand and presented a folder to the judge. "Your Honor, during our investigation, we discovered a second phone belonging to Mr. Mateo Martinez. The contents include photos and messages that corroborate Gabriel's account. We also found evidence suggesting Mr. Martinez's involvement in similar incidents in the past." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Salinas banged his gavel. "Order, Detective Gutierrez. Is this evidence admissible and verified?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mariana confirmed, and the judge turned to Mateo. "Mr. Martinez, based on this evidence and the testimony presented, I am ordering your immediate arrest pending further investigation." As officers moved toward Mateo, Gabriel's small voice broke the tension. "Stop." All eyes turned to the boy. Gabriel's hands were trembling as he stood, his wide, tear-filled eyes locking on Mateo. "You told me you'd hurt Mom if I told anyone, but I'm not afraid anymore." Laura gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Victor placed a steadying arm around her as they watched their son find his voice. Mateo sneered. "He's lying. He's just a scared kid looking for attention." Judge Salinas's stern voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough, Mr. Martinez. Officers, remove him from the courtroom." As Mateo was led away, he shouted protests, but Gabriel's voice rose again, clearer this time. "He hurt Maria Elena. He hurt her, and I tried to stop him, but I couldn't." Laura broke into sobs, rushing to her son's side. She knelt before him, wrapping him in her arms. "It's not your fault, Gabriel. It was never your fault." After Mateo was escorted out, Judge Salinas turned to Isabel. "Dr. Rojas, do you believe Gabriel poses any further risk to himself or others?" "No, Your Honor," Isabel said firmly. "Gabriel's actions were rooted in fear and trauma. Now that he has spoken, he can begin to heal." The judge nodded solemnly. "Then I am overturning Gabriel Martinez's conviction. He is to be released immediately and placed in the care of his parents. Furthermore, I am ordering ongoing psychological support for Gabriel and his family." Cheers erupted in the courtroom, but Laura and Victor could only hold their son close, tears streaming down their faces. As the family left the courthouse, Gabriel's small hand clutching Laura's tightly, Isabel walked beside them. "You were incredibly brave today, Gabriel," she said, her voice warm. "You did something very few people could do." Gabriel looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and sadness. "I just wanted to keep everyone safe." "You did," Isabel assured him. "And now we'll make sure you're safe too." For the first time in weeks, Gabriel managed a small, tentative smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start, the beginning of healing for him and for his family. "Now," Judge Salinas continued, "we move to the charges against Mateo Martinez." Detective Mariana Gutierrez took the stand, presenting the findings from the investigation. "Your Honor, our team uncovered evidence on a secondary device belonging to the defendant. The material includes incriminating photos and messages as well as evidence linking Mr. Martinez to similar incidents in other locations." The courtroom gasped as the severity of Mateo's actions became clear. Mariana's voice remained steady as she detailed the findings. "We have also identified several individuals who corroborated Gabriel's account of events. These witnesses confirm Mateo's manipulative behavior in his attempts to isolate Gabriel from his parents. Laura's hands trembled as she listened, but Victor held her tightly, grounding her in the moment. Isabel leaned forward, her heart heavy as she watched the family process the horrific details. When the prosecution rested, Mateo was called to the stand. His demeanor had changed from defiant to sullen, his gaze fixed on the floor. His lawyer attempted to mount a defense, citing childhood trauma and mental instability. But the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Salinas' voice was stern as he addressed Mateo. "Mr. Martinez, your actions are reprehensible. You betrayed the trust of your family and inflicted unimaginable pain on the most vulnerable among us. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The courtroom erupted again, this time with a sense of closure. Mateo was led away in handcuffs, his protests falling on deaf ears. For Laura, Victor, and Gabriel, it was the first step toward reclaiming their lives. Outside the courthouse, reporters and community members waited eagerly. As Laura and Victor stepped into the sunlight with Gabriel between them, the crowd erupted in cheers. People held signs of support, and some even handed them flowers. One reporter approached cautiously. "Mrs. Martinez, how do you feel about today's outcome?" Laura hesitated, her emotions raw, but she spoke with quiet strength. "I feel relief that the truth has come out and gratitude to everyone who stood by us. Most of all, I feel hope for my son and for our future." Victor nodded, his voice steady. "We want this to be a turning point, not just for us, but for other families who may be suffering in silence. It's time for change." Judge Salinas, moved by the case, held a press conference the following day. The case of Gabriel Martinez highlights serious flaws in how we handle juvenile cases. We must implement more rigorous protocols to ensure that no child is wrongfully accused and that every case is thoroughly investigated. His words resonated with the public, sparking conversations about systemic reform. Advocacy groups rallied behind the cause, and local officials pledged to review and improve the juvenile justice system. Back at home, the Martinez family began to rebuild their lives. Laura redecorated Maria Elena's room, transforming it into a space of hope and memory. Gabriel's colorful drawings covered the walls, each one a testament to his resilience and love for his sister. In therapy sessions organized by Isabel, Gabriel began to open up. Through art and storytelling, he processed his trauma and found ways to express his emotions. His drawings evolved from dark, shadowy figures to vibrant scenes of family and joy. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Gabriel handed his parents a drawing. It depicted their family, Laura, Victor, and Gabriel, standing under a bright sun with Maria Elena's image floating above them like an angel. Laura held the drawing close to her heart, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is beautiful, Gabriel." "She's always with us," Gabriel said softly. "And now we can keep her safe in our hearts." The case had left its scars, but it had also brought the Martinez family closer together. They found solace in their shared strength and in their commitment to honoring Maria Elena's memory. Gabriel's bravery became a source of inspiration for others. He spoke at local events about the importance of speaking up and seeking help, his small voice carrying a powerful message. For Laura and Victor, the journey was far from over, but they knew they would face it together. As they watched Gabriel stand confidently before a crowd, sharing his story, they felt a deep sense of pride. Their son was no longer a victim but a survivor, a beacon of hope for those still living in silence. Justice had been served, and the road to healing had begun. Together they looked toward the future, determined to create a brighter tomorrow for their family and their community. The first morning after Gabriel's return home was a quiet one. The sunlight filtered gently through the curtains of his small bedroom, casting a soft glow on the walls now adorned with his colorful drawings. Gabriel woke slowly, blinking at the familiar surroundings. For the first time in weeks, the fear that had weighed him down seemed lighter, though not entirely gone. In the kitchen, Laura prepared breakfast, her hands moving with purpose but her mind elsewhere. Victor sat at the table, his coffee untouched as he stared at the floor. The events of the past weeks had left deep scars on the family. but Gabriel's presence was a reminder of the resilience they would need to move forward. "Good morning, Gabriel," Laura greeted her son as he entered the kitchen, still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Morning, Mom. Morning, Dad," Gabriel replied, his voice soft but steady. He glanced at the table where a plate of his favorite pancakes waited. The gesture brought a small smile to his face. Later that day, the family attended their first session with Dr. Isabel Rojas at the community clinic. The small therapy room was warm and inviting, with colorful cushions and soft lighting designed to make children feel at ease. Gabriel sat between his parents, clutching a sketchpad that Isabel had encouraged him to bring. "Welcome, Gabriel," Isabel began with a kind smile. "How are you feeling today?" Gabriel hesitated, looking to his parents for reassurance before answering. "A little better, I think." "That's a great start," Isabel replied. "And it's okay to take this one step at a time. Today we'll talk about anything you want, or you can draw if you feel more comfortable with that." Gabriel nodded and began sketching while Isabel gently guided the conversation with Laura and Victor. They spoke about their guilt, their fear of having failed their children, and their determination to rebuild their family. "You've all been through something unimaginable," Isabel said, her voice calm and steady. "Healing won't happen overnight, but the fact that you're here, together, is the most important step." Over the following weeks, Gabriel's drawings became a central part of his healing process. In each session, he shared images that conveyed his emotions more vividly than words ever could. One day, he drew a series of images showing himself standing outside Maria Elena's crib, trying to keep her safe. "Gabriel," Isabel said, gently holding the drawing, "this shows so much bravery. You were trying to protect her even when you were scared." "I felt like I failed," Gabriel admitted, tears welling up in his eyes. "I couldn't stop him." "That's not true," Isabel assured him. "You did everything you could, and your courage helped bring the truth to light. Maria Elena knows that you loved her and that you fought for her." Hearing these words seemed to ease a burden Gabriel had been carrying. He looked at Isabel with a small but genuine smile. "Thank you," he whispered. At home, the family worked to create new routines and moments of connection. Laura and Victor made a conscious effort to spend more time with Gabriel, whether it was playing board games, cooking meals together, or simply sitting and talking about their day. One evening, as they redecorated Maria Elena's old room, Gabriel suggested turning it into a playroom for his little sister, Maria Jose. "I think she'd like that," he said softly. Laura and Victor exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride. "That's a wonderful idea, Gabriel," Laura said, hugging her son tightly. They painted the walls a cheerful yellow and filled the room with toys and Gabriel's artwork. It became a space filled with warmth and hope, a reminder that even in the face of loss, life could find new meaning. The family's journey didn't go unnoticed by their neighbors and community. Teacher Rosa, who had supported Gabriel throughout his ordeal, organized a small event at the local school to raise awareness about the importance of speaking up and addressing trauma in children. Gabriel was hesitant at first, but agreed to share one of his drawings. Standing before the small crowd, he held up an image of a bright sun shining over a family holding hands. "This is what I hope for," he said quietly. "A family that sticks together no matter what." The audience erupted in applause, and Gabriel looked to his parents, who smiled back with pride. Dr. Isabel Rojas also organized group therapy sessions for the Martinez family, allowing them to meet others who had experienced similar traumas. Gabriel bonded with other children, finding comfort in knowing he wasn't alone. Together, they shared stories, played games, and even collaborated on a mural at the community center, a colorful depiction of hope and resilience. For Laura and Victor, the sessions provided a space to share their feelings with other parents, gaining insights and strength from the community. "It's incredible how much better it feels just to know we're not alone," Laura confided to Isabel one evening. As weeks turned into months, Gabriel began to thrive. His drawings became brighter and more hopeful, reflecting his inner journey. He even started attending art classes, where he quickly became a favorite among his peers and teachers. One day, after a particularly inspiring class, Gabriel told Isabel, "When I grow up, I want to help other kids who are scared, like I was." "That's a beautiful goal, Gabriel," Isabel replied, her eyes shining with pride. "You already have the strength and compassion to make a difference." The turning point came one quiet evening at home. As the family gathered around the dinner table, Gabriel spoke up, his voice clear and steady. "I just want to say thank you for not giving up on me. I know it's been hard, but I feel like we're stronger now." Laura and Victor exchanged tearful smiles. "We'll always be here for you, Gabriel," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown us what real courage looks like." That night, as Gabriel went to bed, he placed a final drawing on the wall of Maria Elena's room, a picture of their entire family together under a starry sky. It was his way of saying goodbye to the shadows of the past and embracing the light of the future. For the Martinez family, the road to healing was far from over, but they had found their way forward, together. Each step brought them closer to the life they had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The sun rose over the Martinez family's small home, casting golden rays through the windows. Gabriel sat at the kitchen table, sketching in his notebook. His drawings, once dark and heavy, now carried vibrant colors and hopeful themes. This morning, he was finishing a piece for a special event, the unveiling of the new Maria Elena Foundation, named in memory of his baby sister. Laura bustled around the kitchen preparing breakfast. Victor helped Maria Jose with her shoes, encouraging her to hurry so they could leave on time. The family had come a long way since those dark days, and this event symbolized a new chapter not just for them but for the community. The foundation was born from the family's pain and the hope that their experience could spark change. With the help of Dr. Isabel Rojas and community advocates, the Maria Elena Foundation aimed to raise awareness about child abuse, provide resources for families in crisis, and ensure children's voices were heard. Gabriel had been an integral part of its creation. His drawings were used in promotional materials, and his story inspired the Foundation's mission. "I want to make sure no other kid feels like they have to stay silent," he had told Isabel during one of their sessions. The event was being held at the community center, which had been renovated with the Foundation's support. Bright banners adorned the entrance, and a large mural painted by Gabriel and other children covered one wall, depicting a scene of unity and hope. The center buzzed with activity as families, teachers, and community leaders gathered. Gabriel held tightly to Laura's hand as they arrived, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and nerves. He wore a buttoned-up shirt and carried his sketchbook, ready to share his artwork. "Are you ready, Gabriel?" Laura asked, squeezing his hand gently. He nodded. "I think so, Mom." Victor placed a comforting hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "You've got this, son. We're so proud of you." Dr. Rojas greeted them at the entrance, her smile warm and encouraging. "Gabriel, it's almost time for your speech. Remember, just speak from the heart. Everyone here supports you." When it was time, Gabriel walked to the podium, his small frame seeming even smaller against the backdrop of the large crowd. He took a deep breath, glancing at his parents and Dr. Rojas, who nodded encouragingly. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the microphone amplifying his words. "My name is Gabriel Martinez, and I want to tell you a little about my story." He paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. "A year ago, I didn't think I could ever talk about what happened. I thought it was my fault. I thought no one would believe me, but I was wrong." Gabriel held up one of his drawings, a bright picture of a family holding hands under a radiant sun. "This is what I've learned since then. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to tell the truth. And no matter how scary it feels, there are people who will listen and help." The audience erupted in applause, and Gabriel smiled, the weight of his words lifting as he saw their support. "This foundation is for kids like me, kids who need someone to listen and believe in them. Thank you for being here and for helping us make a difference." After the speech, Gabriel joined Laura and Victor at a booth displaying information about the foundation. Families stopped by to share their stories, thank Gabriel, and learn how they could get involved. One woman with a young boy approached, tears in her eyes. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up," she said. "My son and I are getting the help we need because of you." Gabriel looked at the boy, who was about his age, and gave him a small smile. "You're brave," Gabriel said. "It gets better. I promise." The boy nodded, his grip on his mother's hand tightening. In the center of the event stood a memorial for Maria Elena, a simple but beautiful tribute adorned with flowers and candles. Gabriel placed one of his drawings at its base, a picture of a baby angel surrounded by stars. Laura stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "She'd be so proud of you," she whispered. "I hope so," Gabriel replied softly. "This is for her." As the event wound down, the family walked together through the community center's bright open spaces. Maria José tugged on Gabriel's sleeve. "Can we play outside now?" Gabriel grinned. "Sure, let's go." Outside, the children played tag while Laura and Victor watched from a bench. Dr. Rojas joined them, her expression one of quiet pride. "You've raised an incredible son," she said. "He's going to change lives." "We just want him to be happy," Laura replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But knowing he's making a difference, there's nothing more we could ask for." That evening, as they returned home, Gabriel sat at the kitchen table, sketching once again. This time, his drawing featured a community holding hands with the words "Hope and Love" written at the top. Victor watched from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride. "What's this one for?" "For the next event," Gabriel said. "Dr. Rojas said they might use it as the poster." Victor smiled. "It's perfect." The chapter of pain and silence had closed for the Martinez family, but their journey was far from over. Together, they had found strength in each other and turned their grief into action. The Maria Elena Foundation became a beacon of hope, reaching families across the community and beyond. And for Gabriel, the future was bright. His voice, once silenced, now carried the power to inspire change. Through his art and his courage, he reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, there is always light. As the family sat together that night, laughing and sharing stories, Gabriel looked around at the people who had stood by him. "We're going to be okay," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Laura reached out to hug him. "Yes, my love, we are." And for the first time in a long time, Gabriel believed it. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, their hearts full of love and their future filled with endless possibilities. If this tale touched your heart, make sure to hit the subscribe button and join us for more stories of hope, transformation, and the unbreakable bonds that bring us together. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your own stories of love and second chances. Together, let's keep spreading positivity.